I was pleasantly surprised to find that left-leaning people watch this channel, and for that I thank you. You are a person that's open-minded, willing to hear the opposite side of the argument. And the left-leaning subscriber gave me this article, and it is basically trying to tell me that, look, Japan also censors. It's not just the West that censors, like Japan censors as well. And I guess if you're talking about censorship in the broader term, every single nation on earth censors. But there is a major difference between censorship, okay? Like, not all censorship is born equal. So, for example, in this particular case in Japan, their culture doesn't allow for over-gratuitous violence. Like, they frown upon it. A TV show like The Walking Dead in Japan, they would go, ugh, as they look at it, because it's like just overly gratuitous. A lot of blood, guts, and gore. The West freaks out whenever they see a boobie, whenever they see a titty, whenever they see a depiction of a beautiful woman, they freak out. And not only that, but you also have the political censorship. A manga like The New Normal, that I made the review on in a previous video, wouldn't be allowed to fly in the West. Like, people would try to cancel it. They would petition, they would go and protest, they would do everything they can in order to get Amazon or whatever streaming service you have in order to cancel the distribution of that thing. So what the difference at the core is that, number one, in Japan, you know what will get you in trouble. It's like blood and gore, right? Like, it's objective. Just don't have that, all right? Like, don't have that and you're fine. In the West, it's far more complicated because you can have a translator that's a non-binary person that translates the work of a black woman, and all of a sudden you get a backlash on Twitter and the person has to resign because they don't want the controversy. You wouldn't know that this is a problem. Like, if I were to ask you 1 month ago, it's like, is it okay for a non-binary person to translate the works of a black woman? I'm like, yeah, okay, you know. But it's cultural appropriation, you see. Has Been Hotel has attracted criticism from the left for a lot of things, because some of their LGBT characters have negative traits. And then you also have the problem, it's like, why are there so many LGBT characters that find themselves in hell? So are you actually trying to say that, okay? So you get a backlash against it. You legitimately don't know what can get you into trouble and what isn't. It's a culture of fear. It's a culture of dread. Because if I was an artist and I invest thousands of dollars into a work, let's say a video game or maybe a comic book or something like that, I write it with horror and dread because I don't know what I'm going to do that might offend someone. Like, how much titty is too much titty? How much skin is too sexualized, hyper, mega, ultra sexual, right? So in Japan, you don't deal with that. In Japan, you know, it's like, if you're an artist, just don't draw blood, okay? Don't draw gratuitous violence. And even then, all right, even in Japan, and it says here that the people who buy the new Resident Evil, they have different options. So they have the 0D version, which is intended for players 17 or older. And then you have the 0Z rated build, which is for younger audience, right? So the idea of the Japanese is that they want to protect children. But if you're not a child and you are an adult, then there is less censorship for you because they actually have faith in their citizens that they have the mind required to process the problematic things in society. In the West, censorship is universal because they believe that people don't have the mind required to process things, and they need the guiding hand of the progressive to censors on their behalf, right? Because at the end of the day, like, the reason censorship happens, the same reason is being given. It's like, it's to prevent violence from taking place. So the Japanese ideology is that if a person plays a violent video game, they get subjected to the scenes of violence and they get desensitized to it so they can commit violence in real life. While the Westerner view is that if someone plays a racist or a sexist video game, they become a racist and a sexist, and racism and sexism leads to violence. So it's really like the same argument. It's just that in the West there are a couple more steps, and in Japan is the idea that children should be protected because they don't have their brain fully developed. An adult, which does have his brain fully developed, shouldn't be like prevented from buying whatever he wants. And then in the West, you also have the political censorship, right? So if, for example, someone would watch a manga like The New Normal, he would trivialize the government protective measures with the quarantine So it's basically like heretical literature. It's a dangerous thing. It can get people to stop obeying the authority, and that's problematic. So you have to prevent people from seeing it in order to sanitize society. So it's like a major difference between the censorship of Japan and the censorship of the US. And finally, you also have to take into account that a lot of people don't know what censorship is. Most people will look at the American Constitution and they will draw the conclusion that it's only the government that can censor. And that is absolutely incorrect. Just because the founding fathers at the time who broke away from the British Empire, they were used to the monarchy censoring everything because the monarchy controlled everything. And you couldn't have just a merchant like do whatever he wanted. He had to obey the monarchy. So they wanted to create a nation where that doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that they could foresee the present day social media or the present day environment or no, like it's just like it's illegal for the government to censor, but there are other forms of censorship that can still be considered immoral and you can still try to fight against them. Government, religions, and corporations can censor just fine. The mafia can censor. I mean, if you are the owner of a store and if you have a couple of people from the mafia coming in and saying, hey, take down this sign or we break your window. If the person takes down the sign, that is still censorship. It's not done by the government, it's not done by a company, but it's still duress. The idea of censorship comes from the Roman Empire, and there used to be this job to a person that was literally called a censor, and his job was to remove things that were deemed offensive. And he would deem it offensive. It's not that he would poll or survey the population. It's like if it offended him, then no one got to see it. So that's the core essence of what censorship is. And it can occur through the suppression of words, images, ideas that occurs when someone imposes their personal, political, or moral values onto others. So when the Nazis got around and decided to burn the books, even if the government wouldn't do it, like let's say just a couple of brown shirts would go door to door and they would voluntarily collect the books from citizens that were problematic, and they go into the library and they take the books and they burn them, okay? Even if, like, let's say they wouldn't be affiliated with the government at the time, it would still be censorship. You still have, like, people with the threat of violence saying that these books are not acceptable and we're going to burn them. And if you're going to write a similar book, well, it's going to be bad for you in the future, now won't it? So it can also come from mobs, pressuring a company to drop the creator unless they bend the knee to their values, or platforms deciding what content or users are banned based only the disagreements with their ideas, or even creators may self-censor due to the fear of being doxxed, threatened, and harassed. And by the way, like, this is the end goal of any political system. Because no government has the manpower, no mob is big enough, no company has the reach in order to censor the entire society. But what they can do is that they can hurt a couple of individuals in society to make examples of them, to force other people to comply. And the idea is that eventually what the censor wants is for the person to self-censor. In other words, like the person would want to create a work of art, but they're going to choose not to because they're afraid that if they do their original vision, if they create their original thing, there's going to be backlash and they're going to suffer for it. Like there's going to be punishment if they do it. Now, I don't think, like a society where everything is on the table is okay. Like, I mean, there are certain things which should be censored. And I think the US Supreme Court does a good job at explaining what those are. So you have like pornography, obscene content. Okay, so you get like child pornography that's being depicted like that. That is a problem. Slander, libel, blackmailing, fighting words. You know, like there are a couple of things that I am willing to negotiate on and say that, okay, well, if a country does this, it's not a big thing. But I think it's a big thing when the average Joe is afraid to express political opinions or is afraid to say things and challenge the authority, to challenge power, because bad things will happen to him. And we know that this is the case because there has been a poll done in the United States. And out of all the people polled, the left, the center, and the right, and the far right, they're afraid to oust their political opinions and political views The only people that weren't afraid are the far left. So they're the only ones that are okay with speaking out exactly what they feel. And this is why you have a person like Hassan Piker saying that America deserves 9/11. It's because he doesn't normally filter what he says. He doesn't censor. He's not afraid that the things he's saying can be viewed as problematic. He's not used to being repressed. Meanwhile, everyone else, including J.K. Rowling, is afraid of saying what they actually think because of problems that can happen to them or their business. So to come back to the matter of hand, no, I do not have any problem with Japan doing their version of censorship, okay? It's absolutely objective. Like artists know, do not draw blood, do not draw gore if you want to sell it to the public. There are exceptions to this, we're not going to go into it, but basically they also separate the game into two versions. So do you want the adult version of the game and you have to prove that you're an adult in order to play it? Well, buy it. Or do you want the version of the game that's made for a younger audience, which is going to have less violence? Like, for example, you can't pop the zombies' heads with shotguns and there's less blood in it. Okay? So that's the difference. And yeah, if you had this version of censorship into the West, I wouldn't complain. I would be like, okay, what are the rules? Because I think like at the end of the day, I'm willing to make a compromise. A lot of people are pointing out that a social media without any sort of censorship would be like 4chan. 4chan is not profitable, and therefore you wouldn't have companies doing it. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, fine. Have censorship, but like what's more important and what would convince me to go on a platform is if you were to have all the rules being applied equally. So if you have censorship and you're like, no political extremism, I don't want to see a communist advocating for political extremism without getting punished. Okay? Like everyone should be under the same rules. You shouldn't have a person that is able to do edgy content and to say outlandish things and they don't get punished just because of reasons, but other people do. But anyway, right, let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to and thumbs up the channel. Helps with the algorithm. I keep forgetting to say and ask, but if I don't ask, I don't get. So, man.